Good evening, everyone. I am Michael Markwick. I'm the superintendent of Johnsburg Central School, and on behalf of both boards of education, I would like to thank you for coming to tonight's informational meeting. Tonight's meeting will feature a presentation by representatives from the New York State Education Department on school reorganization, merger, options, and processes. The knowledge gained at tonight's meeting will help both boards determine if they would like to move forward with one of the options presented. At this point, I would like the people from both schools to introduce themselves by saying their names, position, and years of service. Danae, start with you.
Danae Tucker, board president, 7 years board service.
I'm Tim Farrell, the interim superintendent, and this would be my 33rd year, I believe.
Rachel DeGroat, board president, 10 years.
Trish Gardner, Minerva School Board, 3 months interim.
Tom Ordway, Johnsburg School Board, 32 years.
Yeli Killam, Minerva School Board, 8 years, I think.
Erwin Morris, Johnsburg School Board, 15 years.
Cindy Homer, District Clerk, Johnsburg, 7 years.
Lynn Briggs, Secretary Superintendent and Minerva, almost 30 years.
Heather Flanagan, Johnsburg Building Principal, 23 years teaching, 7 years principal.
Chris J., Johnsburg School Board, 17 years.
Melissa Freeburn, Johnsburg School Board, 6 months.
Sarah Williams, Johnsburg School Board, I think 7 years. Courtney McCullough, Minerva, 3 years.
Jody Hyatt, Minerva Central School, coordinator student service, 3 years.
Larry Werner, Johnsburg School, business official, 7 years.
One of the things I'll point out to the people at the table, when we do get into the period of asking questions, we do have a microphone that Mrs. Flanagan will bring around for you to ask your question, because I can already tell you it's a little difficult to hear you here, and the people behind you will not be able to hear you. So if you do have a question, you could raise your hand. Heather will run over to give you the microphone, turn it on, and then you can ask your question so everyone can hear that. Thank you, sir. Also, I would like to say, we do have a board member who is not able to be present tonight. She's in Tennessee, but Mrs. Tara Sears, our vice president, is a board member of 15 years, and she's present again on the WebEx. We have 2 representatives from our BOCES, Dr. Trina Parker, our district superintendent. Many of us have had the pleasure of meeting her already this year when she came to a board meeting. And then we have Mr. Anthony Mueller, Senior Executive Officer of our BOCES, and he has been with us
17 years.
17 years, and Dr. Parker was with us in another role for a number of years, and she just started this year as our district superintendent. They will also serve as additional resources for our schools throughout this process. While the meeting will not include a period of public comment, we are glad to have the public here tonight, both in person and through WebEx. We have pens and paper up front here so that if anyone in the audience wishes to write down a question, you can do that and they will be answered at future meetings. If you join us by WebEx, you can still send your questions to your district clerk. I would like to now turn over the microphone to Dr. Trina Parker, who will introduce our presenters tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Markwick, and thank you so much for having us. We're so happy to be back with you this evening. Thank you for having us, and thank you for welcoming our partners from the New York State Education Department. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome our partners, Christina Coughlin and David Elliott. I'll start by welcoming Christina Coughlin. Christina is an Assistant Commissioner for School Governance, Policy, and Religious and Independent Schools. Dr. Coughlin's responsibilities include support for New York State's 2,000 religious and independent schools, support for the education of Native American children residing on the 11 nations and territories within the boundaries of our state, the oversight and financial support of construction of school facilities, pupil transportation, fiscal oversight of New York's 37 BOCES, school budgeting and fiscal integrity, and she's responsible for implementation of the Smart Schools Bond Act, a $2 billion bond initiative intended to increase student access to classroom technology and to increase the security of public school buildings. Dr. Coughlin has worked in state-level school finance in New York since 2001, and prior to that, she taught in a religious school in Yokohama, Japan. Dr. Coughlin earned a bachelor's degree in economics from Williams College, a master's in educational administration and policy from the University of Chicago, and a PhD in sociology, focusing on non-public school issues from the same institution. I'd also like to welcome David Elliott. David is the coordinator of the Office of Educational Management Services, overseeing the BOCES, Pupil Transportation, Smart Schools Bond Act, and Contracts for Excellence program units at State Ed. In addition to this, David's responsibilities include school district organization and reorganization, and school district governance and policy. David came to SED in May of 2020, having previously worked in public education and public service roles in New York City since 2009. We are pleased to welcome both of them for our discussions this evening. Please join me in welcoming David and Dr. Christina Coughlin.
Good to be here. Thank you very much. Sorry we're a little late. David and I stopped by down to have a burger before we came. We're fueled up with it. I'm going to say a couple of things first. When you ask us questions, we're not going to know all of them. I'm going to say that right now. We're working on a couple of school district reorganization projects in other parts of the state right now, and the questions we get, people are so creative and thinking through things that, we end up having to run back to our lawyers and get guidance from that. So, as Trina said, there's going to be some things that we need to write down and take home. So be patient with us for that, okay? This presentation is intended to kind of lay out some of the options that are out there for school districts that are considering merging or combining in some way. It talks a little bit about the options and the legal structures that are there in state law, and the financial things that flow from it. And then it also talks a little bit about the process. What will happen if the two districts decide to move forward, what that looks like, and then what happens next and next and next. So just to kind of give people here in your two communities a sense of what this would look like and what will happen. So here I go.
Dr. McLaughlin, when you speak, if you could speak closer to the mic, I think it will. Yeah.
People that are online,
Folks online, please mute. Apparently they can't even hear me, so maybe it'll help. Thanks, everybody.
She said the web.
So what is reorganization? So there's a lot of different forms, but we sort of give it the overall name of reorganization, and that's when one or more districts.
A lot of our teachers doing it.
Join or merge to form a single district. So there's three types. Okay. It can mean centralization, annexation, or consolidation. So, centralization. A new school district is created when it includes the entire area of the two schools. It can be established through the merger of any type of school district except city school districts. So are your school districts, are they central school districts? Is that what
Yes.
So there's other types out there, with the exception of city school districts, and any of those different types can combine, but central is the most common. So, and our rule is that they need those two districts that are going to centralize need to touch. Their borders need to touch. You can't have them jumping over, right? So. I'm dead. All right. So annexation it's a little different. That's the second type. That's when a new district isn't created. An annexed district is dissolved and becomes part of the annexing central or union-free district. So, common union-free and central school districts can be annexed to a central or union-free school district if they share a boundary line. So this is more, I don't know, I kind of think of this as like the Pac-Man one, where it's kind of like one district comes, takes over the other district, and then that thing that happens is it has the name of the entity that annexed. Right?
That's much better.
David, you know when I'm going to be done. So consolidation. This is pretty similar to that centralization piece, but it applies because of the works of state law to districts that are union-free or common school districts. It creates a new district. 2 or more common districts may be consolidated as a single common or a single union-free. These are legal things in law. It doesn't make that much of a difference for the school district, but they get these names. And 2 or more union-free districts may be consolidated as a single union-free. A union-free and a common can be consolidated as a single union-free. So those are labels, folks. I mean, it just, state law has these entities in it that could be a union-free school district or a common, and here are the rules of what happens when they merge with others. It doesn't apply to you, but, you know, I might go to some other place in the state next week and do this presentation, and those folks would be more into that, so.
It doesn't apply to us because we're centralized.
Because you're central. This one doesn't matter. It's just sort of, this is how the law works. You are central school district, so the options before you would be most likely centralization or annexation. Right. Again, it doesn't look like I'm in a city out here, right? So consolidation of city school districts. So a district to be consolidated with a school district, the city will have responsibility for the education of the whole area. So that's a city reaches out over its boundaries and grabs district next door. Of course, everybody's got to vote for it, so it's not a grab really, but it's an enlargement of the city, and that's why it ends up being called an enlarged city school district. Down our way, the Troy City School District is actually the Troy Enlarged City School District because it's reached out beyond the boundaries of the city of Troy to include a neighborhood nearby, basically, after the voters went through the process, of course. So people are thinking about why reorganize. It has some financial effects for the districts, right? It can create it creates a larger tax base across the 2 communities. And it also, there are state aid incentives, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail later, but that's often a benefit that people and districts are interested in. Having that, and of course having more kids, makes it easier to have you have more resources. You can enrich educational programs, provide more support services for students, and just all in all more opportunities. So that when districts these days are thinking about combining, a lot of times it's
save one rose for
they're interested in.
That rose dies. That's how you know it's time to get some new flowers.
If you're online, can you merge?
Flowers. All right, now
Mute, sorry. No, my brain is everybody, sorry. I'm in this zone with you. Let me try again. Can you mute if you're online? Thank you. All right, I got it right there. Okay, watch me carefully. Okay, so there's reorganization operating aid. There's also a reorganization incentive aid, which we'll talk about a little bit more, but that state legislators put that in law thinking that districts may, if you reconfigure your school buildings and you add more kids to one or the other, you might want to do some renovations, or in some cases, they might actually want to build a new school building. And so the state provides a richer incentive to the building aid formula that exists to make that easier for the new school district to pull off. The other option for districts as they get smaller, and this is something we see a fair amount of in the state, is a district will decide, say, to shut down maybe its secondary grades or its entire program, and remaining a district as an entity will not operate and will tuition or operate fewer grades and will use a tuition formula to send their students to another district. So that is the benefit of providing more money to the receiving district, which can perhaps enhance programs. But it doesn't generate that aid incentive that the legislature's put in place. So that's something to think about. So that will take voter approval. It doesn't have quite the same level of process that the merger process has, because the merger process is actually changing government entities. So that there's, there's more layers with that one than there is a vote to tuition the kids somewhere else. But both of them require a lot of engagement on the part of the community before it happens. So, next slide. Okay, so step one. So thinking about reorganizing. So the boards of education of the districts that are interested in this will hold joint meetings to determine whether to undergo a formal reorganization step. And the BOCES superintendent is available as an informed and neutral party to provide information and support. So I'm sure many of you know this, but BOCES superintendents are also part employees of the Commissioner of Education, so we're co-workers as well as them having the role that they have locally. And so for the merger process, they actually kind of wear their state hat and provide that kind of neutral voice, and they work with us very closely throughout the process. One of my best friends is a BOCES district superintendent who happened to have a merger vote, you can figure it out. Early in my time at SED, so we had to go through this merger process. We were with them every couple of weeks on meetings, working through issues that members of the community had raised, and lo and behold, 10 years later, we're still pals. So, we spent a lot of time together as part of this process. So the boards have decided that they've thought about moving forward with this process. That they take that vote, the step that they do is they have a merger study. Okay, and those studies are done by consulting firms that are out there that have expertise in this. There's a couple of sort of big players that we work with quite often. They charge a fee. There are grants that New York State offers that would offset, probably not cover the whole cost, but would offset the cost of the study. And there's a grant application process, so you would sort of look at those timelines too. But this next slide. The study's purpose is to provide kind of a neutral look at what the condition of the districts is today. And, well, of course, they can't see the future, these consultants, but they've done this long enough that they have a sense of what it might look like if the two districts combined in some way. And how they might think about using, if they go through this process, how they might think about using that incentive aid that's available to improve their programs and work with the taxpayers and so on. So they try to sort of take that away by having consultants. They sort of try to provide an objective look at what that will be like for those two schools as they combine. And we play a role with that, where we actually review those studies and make sure that it looks like they make sense and that the aid assumptions are correct and things like that, so that the people in the community, as they're thinking about this and proceeding, can feel pretty confident that people have taken a look at it and are comfortable with what it says. So I'm not going to promise that what's in the second paragraph of page 37 is going to be perfect, but we do look at it very closely. And the consultants that we work with will probably tell you frustratingly closely, because we really want to make sure that people in the community have something in front of them that tells them what it might look like. So they look at transportation, they look at current course offerings, they think about, okay, with the staffing levels that are there right now, and if we had you know, for example, like 2 7th grades that are both really small, that both need an English teacher today, what can you do with that extra teacher? What richer programming can you provide? What would that look like? So, you know, they kind of try to, you know, take the facts on the ground, and they do a lot of looking at how many kids are in 7th grade sections and so on, and then try to project out what that would look like for the community, just to give them a sense. And the people who do these are generally people who've been school district superintendents who sort of know the ropes of a school district and know what this will look like. So, and as part of that process, the boards will sort of hold a number of meetings to continue to provide information to the community about what's going on, what the findings are. And those need to be public meetings, obviously, and the consultant will be there and will do their best to provide honest answers, as well as the people in the district to sort of make sure that everybody knows. So the study's done now. We'll imagine ourselves moving forward in time. The district boards think that what they've seen in the study makes it look like it's worth thinking a little bit more about this reorganization process. There is a process, which is not in law, but it's something we have, where the boards of education hold a non-binding straw vote to see if people are interested. The law requires an assessment of public interest in it. And the commissioner needs to know that there is local interest in it before we proceed. The notion of combining 2 governments is actually sort of legally a big deal. I don't know that it's a big deal in practice necessarily, but it's legally a big deal. So it takes a lot of effort on the part of the department as we prepare for you know, assuming both districts pass the straw vote. The next vote is called the commissioner's vote, and that takes a lot of work on the part of staff of the department. Our lawyers get tied up, our staff get tied up prepping things. Very little of it's of interest to people in the real world, but it's, you know, legal stuff needs to get worked out. So we do this assessment of public interest first to make sure that there's a solid chance that when the commissioner's vote happens, that it has a likelihood of passing. So the straw vote happens. Let's say both districts, if either district's voters in 2 separate groups, District A, District B, if either one, the majority says no, it's done at that point. Okay. The DS will tell it. The BOCES district superintendent, I'm going to say DS for short, will tell us, okay, it didn't proceed. If they both vote yes, then, you know, we get a letter, and the letter says, you know, we're in support of a reorganization of these districts, and that starts the sort of more formal legal process that has the commissioner's vote, and, you know, if it passes, then eventually a reorganization. So that study I was talking about, this is a little bit of, you know, I got to this before, but enrollment, what kind of things are in it? Like, what will people have in front of them to think about when they go to that straw vote? Enrollment projections, staffing plans, types of education programs. I talked about this a little bit. What transportation might look like. If you're talking about combining districts, transportation planning actually gets important because kids could be going a little bit further than they were before. And what it looks like fiscally in terms of state aid, district expenditures, and the tax impact. So that's good stuff to have in front of you. So like that would, the consultant's report would do that. We would check it, as I said, make sure that we were pretty comfortable with it. It's not the same as an endorsement from the state education department, but it does mean that state aid experts have taken a look and we feel like they have it right. So for your district, it's not a city school district, right? So you're not going to be enlarging anything. So we're not going to talk about those anymore. But as I said before, the 2 options that would be available here would be either centralization or annexation. So once those straw votes have happened, it starts to look a little, pathways are a little bit different for those 2 combinations. So centralization, again, is the 2 districts join together and become a new district with most likely with a new name. could be a lot of districts, you've probably heard them around here, they've heard the combination of districts, names, or something entirely new. So the centralization model, so the commissioner issues an order laying out a new school district. It's basically saying these are the boundaries. Eligible voters of each district must request a vote to petition for centralization to occur. A second petition from each district is needed in order to vote in multiple locations. Like if you had two buildings that were at different corners of the district, right, you might want to have two voting sites. So that just requires a petition. Yes, can we have that second voting site? And then, and I said this before, a majority at each district is necessary to form a new district. They both districts that are considering merging have to agree. And then if the vote is successful, a new district is formed and a new board is elected down the road. So that piece about both voting, both district voting and having to agree is important, right? If you had a district that had 10,000 people in it that voted and they all voted yes, and a district that had 300 people in it and 149 voted yes and 151 voted no, that merger can't happen, even though the total number of votes are way in the yes group, okay? Because it's affecting your taxes and the educational opportunities for the children in the district and so on. So it does require both. That level of community support is really important.
Dr. Coughlin, clarification question. There's two total votes in each district, a straw vote, an advisory vote, and then the second petition.
Yes.
Both are required.
Yes.
And both simple majorities are required.
Yes.
In order to do it. Okay, thank you.
Yes, for centralization. Annexation is a little different. Okay, so remember, annexation is the case where there's District A and District B. District A grows, covers the boundaries of District B, and then District B no longer exists, and it's all called District A from now on, right? So that one district is now bigger, the other district ceases to exist. Annexation. This structure is a little different in state law. So in this case, the commissioner issues an order to dissolve and annex one district to another. So it happens, basically the outcome of that straw vote, saying the people, and I'll just keep one, right? District B folks voted for their district to essentially be annexed or absorbed or glommed on, I'm going to use how I talk in my house, by District A. Basically, the commissioner sees it, assuming A agrees, the commissioner sees that there doesn't need to be that kind of a vote anymore. The commissioner can just issue an order, because the straw vote then became the vote, right? So the order is final after 60 days, unless residents say they want to vote. So residents of District B in that straw vote said yes, the majority said yes, we'd like to be annexed by A. Commissioner can write an order, there's 60 days. But if there's a petition from district residents at that point, we would get it, and I can't remember the counts that we would require. Do you?
The lesser of 10% of the enrollment or 100 voters.
I don't know how many, what the enrollment is, but here, so let's say it's 100 voters. So 101 people sign a petition saying, you know what, we really actually want to have that vote. Then there's a vote. So, and again, the majority is necessary. If the vote happens, a majority is necessary in both districts to have the annexation happen. And then if the vote was in favor of the annexation, the annexed district is dissolved, as I said. And because District A was kind of taking over B, there's no new board election. District A's board carries on as the leadership of the district. Now, of course, down the road a few years, board votes will happen, and the voters of B will have the right to vote in board elections. So you would expect that, you know, over time, folks from the other neighborhood from B would start to be part of the board. But for that first thing, A's board carries on.
You can also, at that same time, or at the next year, you can also increase or decrease the number of people on the board as well. So you can also authorize to add people to it. So have a little bit more equal representation depending on, you know, the terms and how they fall.
So if you've got a board of 5, you can take it up to 7 through partition, basically.
Dr. McClung, I'm just wondering, right now, we've gone through the process. I have your slideshow, so it helps me. And it looks like the next part is going to be some more numbers and ideas of what. I'm wondering, do you want questions now on the process from the board members, or do you want to finish your presentation and then take questions off the end?
I don't know, board members, what do you think?
I'm sure there's questions.
Do you want to do it right now? This is right in front of us, sort of? Does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay, I see nods. All right, ask away.
And again, make sure Heather is next to you so that she can give you the microphone so everyone can hear the questions. I'll start.
Like, I don't want to be the first.
Oh, come on.
Actually, on the slide that you're on right now, you mentioned that the commissioner outlines a new school district under centralization. Does that mean that all area that both schools represent is included within that new?
Yes.
You could stand there. When you talked about the initial study and what they look at each school today, do they look at patterns within the past 3 to 5 years for those districts, or, okay, perfect, thank you.
Yeah, especially in small districts like this, and the districts that are considering these kind of things, it's not New York City, right? I mean, it's smaller districts. So, you know, you can have a couple of kids in a grade or something like that mess up the data. So they definitely look at a few years and sort of get it, like, this is the pattern of the district. It's not just the kids born in that year were a little weird or something, right? It's longer than that.
Going back to where you were talking about the Pac-Man theory, I don't know if that's a good thing to say, because in that demonstration, it looks like one school's just coming over and taking over the other school. And there's questions on both parts. So I don't want people to think that, you know, one school or the other is just engulfing the other school.
Well, I think
that it's a team effort.
Thank you very much. That's a great point. And I think that the point, that's why we have those votes in that study, so that it is the product of a community decision, and both sides have to agree. Sorry, you don't like my Pac-Man image, but I'm a child of the 80s and I really do, so I'm gonna stick with it for a second.
Okay.
Be patient. Obviously the district that emerges from an annexation is gonna include taxpayers and families and children from both sides. And over time, it's gonna be a single district, right? And it will be the result of this community effort on both sides to study the issues that are going on in the districts, what's available to the kids that are going to school there, and what's best for the communities going forward. The Pac-Man thing is really, it's a governance thing, right? That it just ends up with the name of one of the two districts, the annexor, right? But over time, the board, I would imagine, would blend out, and it would be a board made up of families and taxpayers, residents of the community from the new larger community with the boundaries, with that, you know, with that name. So, you know, it's not, that's why these structures are set up with all this process, with votes and studies and public meetings, and, you know, here we are tonight, because it needs to be a product of a team effort. I like that line. So I'm gonna steal it from you. A team effort on both sides to get to that place, but then the new government entity has the name of one, not the other.
The other thing is, if in our circumstances here, if Minerva, we use Minerva School or we use Johnsburg School, whichever, you're saying that, say that Minerva comes to Johnsburg, so it'd be Johnsburg School. Can the boards at that point rename the school or, you know, so, I mean, there's a lot of heart up here and a lot of people live by the Irish and the Jaguars and, you know, and I don't think either one wants to lose their, you know, so I just was wondering, can you rename at that point?
There's actually a legal process for renaming a district. It's a little bit different, but, and there's rules about what they can be named, but assuming it follows those rules, it can later on change its name.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question clarifying the difference between the centralization and annexation. Is the straw vote specifically to inform one decision or the other?
The straw vote is intended to inform the commissioner of how to proceed, right? Basically, so think of it as it's the sort of the commissioner's temperature take in the local community. So for the annexation, well, I mean, for the centralization, if it's a yes on both sides, then the commissioner says, okay, I'm going to order a vote to happen on both sides. If it's an annexation, then the commissioner can order the annexation. And that will just proceed unless there's a petition to have a vote, in which case there's a vote. So there's something in there to make sure that the local community has supported it. So the straw vote will happen, and then if there's a petition that follows after the straw vote that said, you know, we'd really like to have a community vote on this, again, an official one, as opposed to that straw one, then you can do that. Yeah, go ahead.
And to add to that point, the threshold to hit the vote for the annexation is quite low, actually, if you think about it. So you just need a simple majority on the straw poll to be in favor of annexation and then have the commissioner order the annexation. In those 2 months before that becomes final, you only need 10% of the current enrollment to say, I want to vote, to then trigger the entire community to come out to vote. And if that vote goes down, the annexation does not happen.
So that low threshold for the petition is essentially a safeguard to make sure that people don't feel like they got glommed up by that.
Right.
And can I also?
Yeah.
Can I also ask, I'm assuming both boards can decide if they want to go down just the centralization path, if they are not looking at annexation.
Yeah.
That's the option of the boards. That's not, the commissioner does not prescribe how the reorganization is to take place. That's honestly up to you as the community. If you decide that annexation is the route you want to pursue, that is your option. If you decide that centralization is a route that you want to pursue, that's your other option. You don't get 2 questions on the ballot, you only get 1.
I guess 2 different questions. Regarding the organization, there appears to be the centralization or annexation. Here, realistically, we're probably talking about centralization. And under your description, we're talking about entire District A and entire District B. Could it be more finite in terms of a certain grade level, like an elementary versus a 712, or administration is combined as opposed to entire districts? So that's my first.
Can I take that
question.
one? And then just because I can't keep track of too much. Right. So that combination is not eligible for the aid, for the incentive aid, right? That's the difference. It is quite possible to share administrations. And there's a lot of districts out there that are carrying on as separate districts that have shared superintendents and shared other things, where they use the BOCES to fill in certain positions in the districts. So, and that tuitioning model is essentially what would happen. I mean, that other thing that I talked about where, maybe one district decides, well, we really cannot afford to have a good high school program anymore for our 12 kids. It's too expensive, right? We're going to tuition them over to the neighboring district, and there's a formula that creates a price ceiling for them, and then so they can just decide to do that, right? And some districts do that for a little while, and they decide it didn't work, or they decide more often, they decide, let's add a couple more grades because it's actually making sense. You can see this sometimes in districts. They have, they might want to keep their really little ones close to home, their Ks and 1s and 2s, but then the older kids start to take the bus over to the other district because it's really, there's more services can be provided over there. So those arrangements exist, and they don't require all this paperwork. But the other side is that they're not eligible for the incentive aid. So that's the trade-off. Okay, your second question.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, we're 3 steps ahead of me. I'm thinking that's the road I was going down in terms of, certain parts of the school being combined, but thank you. The second part is if there was a full centralization, what does that look like for staff of both buildings? That's what, we're talking about children, obviously, the effect, but also on the staff.
Well, that is a local decision too. So different districts that combine handle that differently. A lot of them will sort of use the incentive aid to carry staff on over time, and then as sort of natural retirements happen and so on, then they kind of get to another side. I mean, that's probably the most common approach. The other thing is, we've been talking to districts that are thinking about this, and these days they're having such struggles getting certified teachers that it ends up not making that much of a difference at all, because they didn't really have, they were struggling to fill their high school science classes with certified teachers anyway. Lo and behold, that other district had one, and it's like a magic solution. So it's a win. There aren't generally mass layoffs because the incentive aid helps. I think you're seeing that probably at some point. Like they tend to carry people because folks are retiring, and districts that are shrinking in size tend to have, not have done a lot of hiring recently. It's not always true, but just because of, well, if you're shrinking, you don't necessarily need to hire somebody to fill someone who's retired. So it tends not to be as much of a change as people are afraid in the beginning.
Thank you.
One of your slides said, comment on that part too, and I know as a board member, I'd like to see enrich programs, not just delete people, but to enrich programs, have new programs, have extra programs, have more help for our kids with special needs, and I think by doing that, you're utilizing the staffs from both schools and enriching the quality of education your kids are getting anyway. So.
Yeah, obviously that's a local decision, but I'm going to just be the state education department for real for a second and say that's music to our ears, right? But it's hard to do, but this is a moment when it can actually happen, when you can pull that off as a district, just because you have extra, the qualified people are already there. They already know some of the kids, and they'll get to know the rest, right?
Mm-hmm.
My question is about the feasibility study. Who conducts that?
So that you would do like an RFP, and there's a couple of vendors out there that do it. And
Okay,
so there's
so-
one vendor, I'm not recommending, but like it's made up, it's a firm that's made up of former school superintendents.
And it's a different entity that would do the merger study.
It's one study. It's the
It's
same
all
thing.
one study?
It's only one study.
Okay, it's one study,
Yep.
so there's no additional cost for the
Yeah,
feasibility?
you have to pay
get
you have to
that.
pay one fee, not two.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Sorry, we call them both, and our slide deck had both names, but it's the same study.
Okay.
We should fix that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I just know because everyone's dying to know the cost. I mean, you continue to say, but what
I think
about?
they're,
And I'm not going to hold you to it.
so I don't have to, I've never let out an RFP for one of these, but I'm picking a number out of thin air, but it's somewhat well-informed, around 50K, right? And those grants, like I said, the state, it's not the state education department, it's another state agency, has local government efficiency grants that they offer out on an annual cycle, so you would want to watch the deadlines for that so you could apply to get one of those grants and then use that to offset a lot of the costs. And then a lot of times, you know, I don't, those grants might be 30,000, right? And then each district kicks in 10 or something like that, and then, you know, lo and behold, you have a study. And the experienced providers out there are pretty seasoned at this and do a nice job. Do I move on to the money part? All right. Okay, so like I said, there are two different aid streams. The state of New York has had these for years and years. You know, there used to be something like 10,000 school districts in the state of New York. And now we're at, depending on how you count school districts, around 700. Okay. And some of this aid stream has helped. So it's a little weird how it is in state law, but this is how it is. So it uses a portion of the operating aid that school districts got in the 2006-07 school year, and each district, it takes 40% of that. So each district, you can find this on the state aid ones, and David's put this in here. If you go to the New York State Education Department state aid website, you can look at the state aid runs and find out what they are for each district. So we have them in the next slide. I think it's the next slide for Minerva and Johnsburg. But you know, if you were thinking about talking to the districts on the other side, you can actually look at theirs too, because they haven't changed in state law since 2006-07. And it's a weird thing. It's an artifact of the fact that was the year that the next year was the year they created foundation aid, which took that operating aid and a bunch of other things, made it one thing. It was like 17, I was on maternity leave, but it was something like sorry about that. But, that kid now has a learner's permit. Don't be afraid, she's not driving up here, down by Albany. It's like 15 aid programs that used to run prior to 6-7 got combined into foundation aid. And before then, that operating aid formula would change every year. That was part of the state budget, and the school districts would know that. That year, it went into foundation aid, and all of a sudden, there wasn't a new number every year. So it's a quirk in the state law that it's just stayed at that amount since then. They've never changed it. Now, the regents say it might be nice to update that. But so far, the legislature hasn't bought what we're selling. We'll keep trying. But you know, these numbers are publicly available, and we're going to tell you what they are for Johnsburg and Minerva. But like I said, if you want looking at the neighbors on the other side, you can just go to that website and see it. So this incentive runs for 14 years. So for the first few years, you get the sum of the 40% of 2006-07 operating aid for the two districts. I think let's go to the next slide because it shows how it works. So this is really small, but what it does is, so 1, 2, 3, the first 5 years? 5 years. It's 40%. It's that 40% number that's operating aid. Then it starts to gradually go down by 4% of that operating aid each year. So that by the time you hit year 14, you're at 4%, and then in year 15, it's gone to 0. So it's an incentive that exists for a period of time. And the idea is that there's startup costs of a new district, right? Excuse me. Sometimes they need new textbooks, new branding for things, right? New T-shirts and whatever else. Leveling up salaries contracts. That's a thing that some districts do with this money, right? So that there's kind of an adjustment phase where they get that full 40% of those aid formulas from 6-7, And then it gradually tapers down as it sort of becomes one district, is the principle of state law. So these numbers are on this. The numbers that apply to your two school districts are on this deck. So in year one, you can see it. I can't even see it. Never mind you all, but I can't see it. So it's a little skosh under 402,000. So that's what you would get for the first few years of this. By the last year that you get anything, you get 40,000. And then the next year it goes to 0. But presumably by then, these are two merged districts that are merged districts. And they're not thinking of themselves as Johnsburg and Minerva anymore. They're two districts. And the budgets and budget votes and board votes and all those things have been going along as a single unit, one way or another, during that time. Yeah, thanks. So that's the operating side. The other piece is that thing I talked about before in the building aid, right? The buildings, they may need to do some reconfiguration, they might add space in one building, they might even create a new building if that's appropriate. So when adding new space, the two districts have building aid ratios that are calculated under a formula that comes in state law, right? The higher of the two, so whichever district has a higher aid ratio, that starts, right? And then that's increased by 30% of that aid ratio up to 95%. Okay, so the combined aid ratio for a combination of Minerva and Johnsburg would be, right now, it would be 75.9%. That would be the incentive based. So you have approved costs that you would run through the Office of Facilities Planning at State Ed, the normal process there, and your aid ratio would be bumped up so that it would get to the point when it was 75.9%. Now, I said they are approved costs. That's actually really important because what happens in the Office of Facilities Planning, and this is what they do all the time for school districts, it's not, this part isn't new, is there are formulas that the office uses based on student counts and the types of programs you're running and grade levels and so on, where they figure out what the maximum cost allowance is for a particular building. And that's a way to make sure that the state's aiding roughly the same amount of school building in Johnsburg as it is in Syosset, which is a super rich district down on Long Island, right? So we pay for the same kind of building, right? And then there's an aid ratio where a poorer district gets a higher percent of that approved building paid for, right? If you decided that you were going to build a whole new building, we would look at the enrollments of the combined districts, the grade levels, and we'd figure out what the approved cost would be. And then we would apply this higher aid ratio to that, to build a new building. It would be, I'm pretty sure I can guarantee you that it would be a lot smaller than the space you have now. Because these buildings that you have now reflect enrollments from prior years when you had more kids here. And so that's why my slide says new space. Right? If you're going to build new space, we look at, just like we would if you came to us and said we want to enlarge our current space, we look at your enrollments. Do you have enough kids to justify the state paying for that extra space? If we didn't have that, we'd have districts right on Long Island that had, buildings the size of Kansas, right? So we don't want to do that. This formula makes it fair across the state, right? So that's for new space. Now, on a day-to-day basis in our Office of Facilities Planning, which reports to me, so I know what they're doing. Like, we have a lot of rural school districts that have buildings that were designed for, say, 750 kids. Now they have 350 kids in their high school. Right? If we ever applied this formula to those districts, they would just have half the building with the roof unfixed and unfixable because they couldn't afford to keep it up. So if it's the existing footprint of the buildings, if you're not adding new space, I think we can go to the next slide. We would apply this, we would apply that higher aid ratio, that incentive operating aid ratio, to the work you were going to do in your current footprint. Probably more bang for the buck, but that's your call. It's a local decision, right? But if you're thinking of adding new space, you have to recognize that we would like, people are used to a lot of space in these buildings because the enrollments have shrunk relative to what they were when the buildings were built, right? So they feel spacious, but you don't know that until you go somewhere else and you see what our formula generates, right? It's a much smaller building. Kind of like you don't realize when you're an American how big your elbows are and how much you wave your arms until you try teaching in a religious school in Japan, and all of a sudden you're hitting 3 people when you wave your arms like that. Been there, done that. You'd find that too in the space that our formulas generate, but that is a possibility, right? And districts consider that. If they have buildings that are in really, really poor shape, they may think a smaller new building is better than a really, really bad one. This seems okay, but you know. So the other thing to know is that SED will adjust building aid payments for existing debt. So if you all are paying off a bond right now and you reorganize and you are eligible for that building aid incentive, we actually adjust your future payments for that new aid ratio. It doesn't get the enhanced one, but it's the higher of the two. So I don't know what yours are. I didn't study for the quiz before I came, but let's say one is 50% and one is 60%. The new district's remaining bond payments for both districts would be now paid at 60%. So that's a nice little benefit too.
So the number that you're presenting there, the 75.9, that is our number.
So that's your two aid ratios now, the higher of them, and I don't know what it is, and then with 30% of that number added on. With a ceiling of, I mean, if, you know, you could be much poorer districts than you are and be up at, you know, be capped, and have that come to, have that number come above 95%, but the state only pays 95%.
And to make it somewhat in simple terms, a project that were to go forward, that would mean the state would pay 75 cents on the dollar, and the district
Of the
would
approved
pay
costs.
of the approved cost.
Right, and that's really important that you know that. Okay, so my pitch about aid formulas is so exciting that we've decided to move forward. So here's what that, can't blame those guys. I've been doing state aid a long time, I want to do the same thing. Anyway, so here's what a timeline might look like. We talked about the process in a big picture, but let's bring it down to what it could look like here. It's for the boards to decide, right? But what it could look like here is, you've heard Coughlin come out, you love this pitch, 2 boards meet and resolve to do this feasibility or merger study. So there's an RFP, a vendor is selected, the study begins. Those take a while, those take months, because they do community sessions, they do a lot of research about enrollment and aid and condition of buildings and all those things. But let's say, you know, on the normal course, sometime in the summer of 23, of this summer, the draft could be presented to the boards of education. And that assumes that, you know, SEDs read it and, you know, any questions we had about what we saw in the study have been addressed properly, and we said, yes, you can use this study. So we do that. The boards read it, they think, hey, there's a recommendation here that we could proceed, perhaps we should proceed. Again, it's the board's decision. They decide to proceed. Okay, so then there's some more public meetings. Again, you really want to make sure the whole community understands what this is, right? And then there's a straw vote to gauge public support. And it's really short, the 2 distances between straw vote and, can you remind me of the time frame? So let's say there's a straw vote that's successful on, do you remember this time frame between? I forget it.
There is, after the letter in support of the reorganization from the BOCES, I want to say there's 10 days.
Okay.
To turn around an order.
So that's
happens very quickly.
So you all have a straw vote, and I don't know if this could be a Sunday for all I know, so I'm just picking a date. September 15th, there's a straw vote. both districts pass it. Tarina writes a letter to Commissioner Rosa saying, I recommend that you proceed with a vote. Commissioner has 10 days to issue an order to have that vote. And then there's some time for public notification after that, and that's the part. Do you remember what the public notification requirement is after the commissioner issues the order?
It gets posted within 10 days.
Okay.
Publicly, which would, at this point, also include the web, because the law doesn't.
Yeah, the law is so old, it doesn't even, they didn't have the internet when they wrote this law, and they haven't changed it, but.
And then the vote date gets set within 30 days.
Doesn't mean the vote's within 30 days, it just means
the
that.
date gets set within 30 days of the order.
Yep. Commissioner issues her order on the 25th of September. Within 30 days of that, the communities have said, okay, we're going to have a vote. And so then the vote is a few weeks after that. So here we are suddenly we're in late fall of 2023. All right, there's a vote. It's successful. So then obviously people are going to go into the budget vote and the board votes with the understanding that there's going to be a new district on July 1. So proposed budgets would be adjusted to reflect the aid, the incentive aid, and the costs of combining districts.
Could I also?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is also a fairly typical timeline in that in considering the cycle of the budget, having the knowledge as to whether or not you're proceeding as your own district or as a combined is really helpful come early January, which is when that really begins in earnest. So you want to be able to have a fully prepared budget for the combined two districts in May.
So I'm assuming always the earliest date is going to be July 1st, 2024, 2025, but it's always going to be July 1st. Is
Yes.
that true?
The fiscal year.
That's the
To
start.
fit into that cycle.
Right.
It works best for the way we budget. And
Exactly.
plan
Fiscal year,
programs.
yeah. The combine, if the districts do vote to combine, do choose to combine, the first date of operation will always be the first date of the fiscal year, which would be in our case in New York school districts, July 1.
So can you talk a little bit about how that vote happens? So like if you are going forward, is it at that point would you still have two separate community votes?
So are you talking about the budget vote? Wait, for the district is going to combine?
Yeah, so you've decided that
you
you're
have a budget.
preparing, so you're at a point where you have two separate boards that are still acting, they're still building a budget, but they aren't actually going to be the board come July 1st because there's going to be that whole new process of electing.
So
Go ahead.
at that point then, if it's a centralization and it's going to be a new board, the two school districts still act independently until at least June 30th to close out that school year. However, immediately after the vote is confirmed in favor of a centralization, a new board is elected within it's a couple of weeks, really. So there would be another vote on the people to be on the board. For a centralization vote, the yes or no is also accompanied by questions of, do you want to expand the board? How many members? And the terms. So how many years and how many people each year are cycled out?
I think what Danae might be referencing though is you have to still though somehow during that pre-time come together and create a budget.
Yep.
And does that budget get voted on? How does that budget get voted on for the next year? You know you're a new district.
So in May, the vote would be on the new budget. the
So
combined.
there could be two voting sites.
Yeah, there could be,
Right.
yes.
If
there-
that's
there
the
could
question,
definitely
there could be two
voting
voting sites, but the rules about the majorities and all that would apply to the whole, all the voters in the district. There
So
wouldn't
the
be-
budget is voted on, but the board is not at that point.
Because the board's already been pre-established,
So you know
the
who
two
it
boards
is.
that exist would know who that new board is gonna be, so they could,
They
in
would help
theory,
them,
be
yeah, there would
working
be
with
some
us.
shadowing and some, what's the word? Just collaboration between, there might be some overlap. I mean, depending on if a person that's on an old board also decides to run for the new board, there might be some people who just can continue if that happens.
And is there any breakdown between the two pre-existing districts, or once it's merged, it's just one vote
if
for
it's
X
a-
number of
Yeah,
people?
right, I mean.
As of July.
Right, for the, and I want to be specific, the centralization model.
Yes.
It's one board, so they would, have the vote and they would just be the new board members. For the annexation, the first round, it would still, the board wouldn't change, right? Because it's the same, remember, the old district got bigger essentially. So again, we'll call it District A. District A's board would carry on. So we're talking about centralization because that's when you have two government entities becoming actually merging as opposed to one getting bigger. In both cases, the next round of board votes would start to be more typical and it would probably even out between the two districts, the two old districts. I feel like I'm not quite there.
We're good.
Okay. This can get really technical really fast, so put everybody to sleep, but obviously, if you've had a successful vote in the fall and it's going to be a single district for the next school year, you start to plan as a combined unit because you need to think about, what are you going to do with those seventh graders? Where are they going to be? And what's that going to cost? That suddenly becomes an issue that everybody's got to be moving toward. It stops being two separate entities at that point, essentially, because you're planning for the year when it's going to be real. And it's only a few months away at that point. So the boards would have to work in collaboration with each other and with their colleagues on a new board, if that were elected, to make it work for the coming year. That's an important part of this.
So when that statutory vote takes place in late fall, what actually is decided? The makeup of a new board or just the mere fact that the districts are in favor of a centralization?
There's two pieces. There's the favor of the centralization and then should we enlarge the board. If it passes, it's worded very carefully. If it passes, should we change the board? So then, if it doesn't pass, you're not voting to change the board. It's only if. So it's a two-part vote.
So hypothetically, it passes, they vote to enlarge the board. Now talk about the process and the timelines moving forward.
So that's the place where the commissioner recognizes that the district will be combined. And then there is another vote, and I don't know the timelines for the board vote, which is what you're getting at, but it would be relatively shortly thereafter, because that's the board that needs to plan for the budget for the next year.
And there is a process for nominations and to get your name on the ballot and all that. It's just like you would now when you have a vacancy upcoming, but every seat is a vacancy for a new board. And I don't know top of my head the timeline on that, but it is a matter of weeks, not months, to get the new board at least established. And I believe they take the oath after the vote, so they are acting as the board of the new district. However, that new district does not operate until July. So the old two boards are still acting as overseeing the two districts and doing everything that they need to do to, close out contracts, consider food service, talk to your transportation provider. If there's a library that's attached to a school budget, what's going to happen there? How's that going to end up? So there's a lot to work out there, and that's what that, from January to July isn't really even enough time, but that's there to do that, you know. Additionally, it doesn't happen often, but the new district does not necessarily need to start operating that coming July. If you request, the commissioner can issue the order so that the new district, if it happens, there's an extra year of operation to plan and prep.
It would still be July 1st, but it could be.
But it would always be another, yes, yeah. Always July 1st, always.
So you have to excuse me, I just want to make sure. So I'm going to start with the straw poll. That's done after the study.
Study's
Correct.
done, boards have accepted it, boards resolved to have a straw poll. Yes.
Okay, so the study's done. It is done within each community. We do a straw poll, and then the other community does a straw poll. If either
Generally the
one,
same day, but yes.
right, but either one of the communities says, no, thank you, then the process is over.
Yep.
Okay, say they both say yes. Then we go to the commissioner's vote. And then that goes through, again, there's a commissioner's vote here, and there's a commissioner's vote in Minerva.
So if I can.
Yeah, but.
If it's an annexation, which I'm assuming.
No, let's just talk centralization right now. Let's go down that road.
Yep.
Okay, so centralization.
To the letter of the law, if you want to vote in 2 districts and not just have the one location, then you need to have 2 petitions in each of the districts to have each of the district be a polling location.
Okay.
Okay, so that is why on that slide it said that there's 2 petitions needed. If you don't submit.
But that's how people usually do it.
Right.
Okay.
We will, if you go that route, we'll tell you, you're gonna need 2 petitions.
Okay.
Don't worry about that. You're not gonna, but you do need two petitions, otherwise, you're only gonna be able to vote in one place.
Okay, so we have 2 petitions. Again, Minerva's gonna have a vote, we're gonna have a vote, and then if either community again says no, thank you, we're done.
That's correct.
Okay, say both communities say yes.
Yep.
And it votes and it gets through. Then you carry forward with your 2 boards until July 1st. And then you do present a single budget though in both communities, I'm assuming, for the next year coming. And then once July 1st hits, you have 10 days or whatever, how many days you said, to elect a new board.
Not quite. The new board is selected
Like in January.
shortly after the vote, the
commissioner's
successful vote, yeah. Because
And-
that vote really, that's the board that's really gonna have to plan for the new district.
Okay.
So you have 3 boards, 2 old
Yeah.
boards and a new board.
Yes.
Simultaneously.
Hopefully they play nicely together and say, we're gonna work really well together for the next 6 months and get this thing started off well.
Thank you.
I'm gonna hide the mic. Could we?
Turn it on.
Can we back up just a bit? Can you give us any more information on who and what's involved with a typical feasibility study? I don't mean who does it for us, but how does that involve the school community?
It involves the school community a lot. First place, there's a lot of data that I would think probably business official type people and, people who report in attendance and stuff like that would share with the consultants. There's also a lot of information, and information about transportation, like where are the kids, where are they going, that kind of thing, because that's important to, especially if you're enlarging the district. What's that going to look like in a larger district? So, there's a lot of data that the 2 districts would share with the consultants, but there's also a number of conversations that the consultants would sort of sponsor, probably in this room, and talk about, and the one in the other district, and talk about, like, what do they want, what does the community want out of a merger, what are their concerns, like, it's a public process to collect information as well. So here's data about what we're offering in our high school. We have, one section of English 9, 10, 11, 12, we have journalism elective, like that kind of stuff is there, but also this other piece about, where would we like the district to be, is interaction with the community. So there's 2 kinds of information.
Thank you.
Other? I'm jumping way back, because I just have a question here. We said it has to share a boundary. Is there anything, it's 2 different counties. Does that?
The county doesn't.
The county doesn't mean anything? Okay.
the district lines have to touch.
Okay.
And sometimes they're not even the same BOCES. You know, in this case, they're in the same BOCES, which makes it easier for everybody, but they don't have to be even in the same BOCES.
Okay.
Can you bring your microphone a little closer? Thank you.
I'm gonna start to sing now. Any questions on the process? I think we're just about done with that.
Thanks for the last slide.
Yeah, okay, questions, okay, there we go. So on the day of the commissioners' vote, we generally come out to a meeting in the community beforehand and to sort of describe the process again, because you all are the core of the most interested people, right? But there's a lot of people who are going to be very interested, but didn't make it here. So we would come out to do one, to sort of talk and be available, like, here's what the state's role is in this. But, then on the day, because that vote that happens, the official vote, when it happens, it's the commissioner's vote. The commissioner has staff here. Part of that would be the BOCES district superintendent, who, as I said at the outset, is a partial employee of the commissioner, probably in one district, and then someone from the Office of School Governance in the other district, just so people know that everybody's watching, it's okay. Sometimes people get concerned about things changing or whatever, and we want to make them feel comfortable that the vote reflects the opinion of the citizens of the community, right? So we're here, and we observe the counting, we observe the process, and then there's a process for informing the commissioner after the vote, but we also send an email, so there's kind of eyes on it from both the sort of official formal, here's a notification, commissioner, the votes were successful, but at the same time, if I'm here, she'd expect me to send her a note right away. So, we're around for this process. And, you all have asked a lot of questions tonight. People in the community will ask 1,000 more. And, if you're moving forward with this, we would probably work, maybe even like monthly meetings with the BOCES district superintendent and the superintendents to sort of talk through where it stands, what's going on. So we do stay involved in this because, at the end of the day, it makes a lot of difference in the local community, but it's also a government thing. So state government is kind of have to oversee it as well.
I'm just curious, so for the straw poll and the commissioner's vote, do you put together, and is it just simply, do you want this to happen, or are there multiple questions, or is it just left a very basic?
So for the straw vote, it's just like yes or no, right? It's really simple.
Okay, no other questions are asked
Right.
on it, it's just.
Yeah, but that's for the straw vote.
So yeah, for the straw vote.
Yeah.
For the straw vote, there's only the one question on the ballot, and it's, do you wish to proceed? And it's a yes or no answer. For the commissioner's vote on a centralization, there are a number of questions. So the first question is always the yes or no. Do you want to combine? And if the answer is yes, then there's a question 2. So you answer all the questions, but if the majority is no for question 1, then question 2 and 3 and however many don't count. They aren't even counted.
And are those questions we come up with, or they're just regular questions?
No, we set the ballot. Okay. Yeah. The commissioner's, the vote is controlled by the department. We follow the procedure that has been followed for at least since 1953. We will, provide a copy of the ballot with each of the questions. Those questions are, do you want to proceed, yes or no? And then if yes, how many members of the board, or how many members on the board do you wish to have? And the answer, it would be 5, 7, or 9. And then there's a question of terms. How long are the terms? I don't know the options for years. I think it's like 2 to 5 years, something like that. I don't remember exactly. But
then, so those questions are all answered by all the voters. However, as I said, if question 1 is no overwhelmingly, then question 2 and 3, we don't even look at.
Backing up, you spoke about the, okay, so after the feasibility study, that information is submitted to the commissioner. They look at that, and then the straw vote happens, and they look at that. Now, you mentioned something about it, if it was really lopsided between the communities, the commissioner can then make an annexation happen? Did I hear that?
No, it's, with the annexation, so let's go, we've talked a lot about centralization, but let me talk again a little bit more about annexation. So annexation, there's a straw vote, right? In both districts, they both have to say yes, okay, for it to proceed. If they do, if the voters do say yes in both districts, commissioner issues an order that the districts be combined, right? There's 60 days that can go by. In that 60-day period, there can be a petition by people in the communities to say, you know what, we'd actually like to have a second vote. So that petition can stop it proceeding at that point, because there's a vote then, and then the outcome of the vote drives what happens, right? So it's either an order, you know, we had a straw vote and then the commissioner ordered it and it just moves on, or we had a straw vote, the commissioner ordered it, but people in the community petition and say, no, you don't do that, have another vote, in which case we have another vote.
So that's only if annexation is on the
Right.
ballot, not.
Right. That's if the model that you're voting on is annexation.
I'd like to just add to that.
Getting your steps in.
Just one a note about the annexation procedures as well is that the vote, the second vote does not need to happen at all. The districts, the residents have a choice at that point, and that second vote, it can only happen in one of the 2 districts. It doesn't need to happen in both. So if one district decides, you know what, let's have this vote, and the other one says, you know what, we're fine, just, it can happen, they're not gonna vote. But if the one district decides to vote down, then again, it does not go through.
And none of those incentive aids are connected to annexation.
No, that is not true, they are.
Annexation.
Oh, they are.
Yes, the tuitioning model, where the school board exists to levy a tax and to write checks to another school district to educate, that there's no aid incentive. But any of the reorganizations, so the annexation, the centralization, and then the other ones that don't apply, the aid incentive is included for any of those.
Thank you.
Now, somebody else will be doing the voting for, or not doing the voting, but doing the process for the voting for us, correct? Is there still like a normal, is there absentee ballots and everything included too?
There's no, a lot of this is done locally, even when it's the commissioner's vote, a lot of that work is done locally.
Okay, but it's the
There's not state work
same
for
as any budget vote or anything else?
Yeah.
Okay.
There are a couple of slight differences, but it's not anything that would look radical or.
Okay, my question was along those same lines. Who is responsible for publicizing and notifying the community of these votes? Each district?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I know, like, one of the rules is, publicly, what's the quote in the law? It's a little bit old-fashioned language, but basically, public places in the district. So obviously.
It's like the post office.
Yeah, I mean, it's places where people in the district are.
Right.
We wouldn't necessarily know that from Albany, so put signs up, hey, folks, there's gonna be a vote, that kind of thing. Just so that everybody, you don't want anybody to be, you don't want the process to be people afraid after the fact that the process played out a certain way because people didn't know. You want everybody to know, right? And everybody to know how it worked out in the end and feel comfortable that they had the opportunity to participate. So the law requires a lot of postings.
Can I follow up with one more question. I'm just trying to look at this from the broader picture. I guess, who determines what the basic architecture of the centralization is? In other words, is it going to be, keeping two buildings? Is it going to include details? Or, in other words, when you vote, you only have a yes or no on centralization, or can it be broken down further in terms of?
The vote itself is very simple. It's the process that happens afterward is the board coming to that. But, you would think that, what often happens is that part of that feasibility study, right, which happens before any votes, the community would have had a chance to think about that and say, well, I think I like that word architecture. Like the architecture of a new district maybe should look like this, and the study can sort of speak to different models that are available. So, but it's the board's decision. It's local. It's not the state. It's not the consultant that does that. It's actually the new board will make those decisions. And I can certainly imagine a situation where a board keeps it as is for a year or two to sort of get the lay of the land, and then says, you know what, maybe it's going to be better if we have all our high school kids over here and our younger ones over here, or whatever. Like, it doesn't have to be all set on July 1st.
Who decides whether it's going to be centralization or annexation?
The boards. Yeah, I mean, the boards would have to agree on the model, right? But that's a local decision.
Okay, we go back to the votes again. So my question is, the board is the initial, they decide if the study's going to happen, correct?
Two boards, but yes.
The two boards, right. And then does the board have to vote again to go further than the study and present it at the straw?
Yes.
Okay, so then there's another vote for the board. Then the straw poll happens. And after that second vote from the board, I'm assuming they're out of the process as far as saying yes or no. It's then community-based.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a fair way to say it. Yeah.
So just along that same line, hypothetically, one district says we want to move forward with the feasibility study. The other board does not, so that's where it ends. And that comes by way of individual board votes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Thank you.
If you want to look at the votes in a different way, so the straw vote is the residents, they're telling the boards, yes, we want to go through with this. The commissioner's vote says, I'm going to give you one more chance to say no. And then you have to tell the commissioner, yes, we definitely want to do this. So you have to say yes twice, basically, if you want this to happen.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Everybody's favorite part of the meeting, closing. So as we bring tonight's meeting to an end, I think it's pretty clear that this is a very involved process. I want to thank Christine and David, our state ed representatives, for making the trip up, for supporting our local economy and buying a burger. There's plenty of places to stop on your way out as well. But I do really appreciate the trip. I'm sorry that didn't happen earlier, but our weather up here is a little unpredictable. I want to thank Mr. Markwika and the Johnsburg District for hosting tonight's meeting. There was a lot of work set up to get things going. Dr. Parker, Mr. Muller, you'll obviously be in the loop in the days and weeks to come. We always appreciate your assistance. The Johnsburg and Minerva school boards, these are big questions, big topics, complicated questions with complicated solutions. I appreciate your continued willingness to consider some of these tough questions and some of the solutions that come with those. I hope that each of you found tonight's meeting purposeful. I know that I did. It's a little overwhelming, But I hope that you found it purposeful. Thank you to our administrative teams and our business officials. You'll obviously, if both districts decide to move forward with this, you'll be central to this process. I think lastly, thanks to all the people that took time to show up tonight, both in person and virtual. It was great to see some students here. That's very exciting. We have faculty, staff, parents, former board members. We have a nice mix tonight. I really appreciate that. I want to remind everybody that we had 2 meetings that have already been set up. Johnsburg has a meeting set up for the Johnsburg School Community on February 13th, Monday the 13th at 6 o'clock, right here in their cafetorium. That's prior to their regularly scheduled board meeting, and that's expressly for the purpose of Johnsburg folks to ask questions and engage in discussion with the Johnsburg School Board following tonight's meeting. Minerva, we have our own meeting a couple days later, Wednesday at 6 o'clock, which is not a regular board meeting night, but we have that set aside for Minerva residents, for our school community, to engage in discussion with the Minerva School Board about opportunities and challenges and questions that they have about this, again, very involved process. I think it's important. We've learned, one of the things I think that we've learned tonight again is that it's involved. There aren't always, easy answers to some of our challenging questions. So we've hopefully provide a couple different avenues. One, if you have questions, there's a Dropbox here tonight. There's some slips of paper. You could just jot your question. We simply ask that you identify whether you're a member of the Minerva or Johnsburg community, so that way we can help our boards prepare for those conversations moving forward. The second opportunity that I encourage everybody to take virtually or those in person is if you could mail those questions to our district clerks. In Minerva's case, it's Mrs. Lynn Green. Lynn, your email is greenl@minervasd.org. In Johnsburg case, it's Mrs. Homer, Cindy Homer. Your email address is C. Homer. So what we'll do is we'll put links with those emails addresses. You're very excited about that, board clerks. We'll put those on our website so that people can email you those questions. If you'd prefer to do so, you can do those hard copies of those questions tonight. And in the future, Mr. Mark Weekly, you'll have drop boxes in your entryway. Coincidentally, Minerva just purchased a drop box that we're going to use primarily for our fall tax billing, but we'll get that installed in our entryway, and we'll use that for a drop box for questionnaires relative to the school merger process. So either way, one of the things I want to point out, though, is the importance of you doing that ahead of time. It will help our boards of education prepare for your questions, to have answers to your questions, whether we have to reach out to our BOCES staff, whether we have to reach out to our state ed staff, so we're better prepared to address those questions during our February meetings or any subsequent meetings. So, Mr. Markwica?
Mr. Farrell, could you also mention, I think both schools, it would be advantageous to have a drop box somewhere in the building for students. So if students have questions, or staff.
Good point. So for those of you that couldn't hear Mr. Markwica, he's suggesting that both schools also locate a drop box someplace inside the school building, even specifically for student use. In our case, I would ask Ms. Hyatt to figure out a location that would work best for our students. That's a good suggestion. Thank you. Students and staff, thank you. Again, on behalf of both school boards, our virtual attendees, our in-person attendees, we look forward to continuing to work with our school communities on this process, learning about how it might apply to both of our school communities. But I think before we leave tonight, I want to reinforce our boards individually and then collectively, your next decision is whether to move forward with the commissioning of a formal feasibility study. That really is your next decision. We've talked a lot about votes and timelines, but none of that can happen until you make the decision whether to move forward with a feasibility study. Okay? Again, thank you, boards of education members, thank you, community members, BOCES, state ed peeps. Thank you very much. And I encourage you to drop a question off on your way out. If not, we've reviewed our 2 avenues. Anything else, Mr. Markwica?
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all for attending and closing out.
Building aid. Now, one of the things, you get 49,